All right, happy afternoon. We're back for another great edition of the Living a Purposeful Lifestyle Show. I am Jason Ricks, your host, and today I have a great friend of mine who I met about 2.5 months ago. But she is a master networker and a true expert in the HR payroll space. And I have learned so much from her already just since we got to know each other. And I just had to have her on the show to share her knowledge with us and just her story, which I found captivating. And I give you Julie Kannas-Geyer. So, Julie, my bestie, welcome to the show and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so it's we've been talking about having you on for several weeks now. I'm glad we were able to finally find a time that works because you are one busy lady. But for those tuning in and joining us, I kind of know your backstory, but how did you get into the payroll space? Because that's not like something you go to high school and you put on your dream list. Like, I'm going to be in payroll, right? Like, I don't know a lot of people do that. So talk to us about how you got there and how you ended up deciding that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, talk about high school and college. I never even knew I wanted to be in sales. So, I spent the really beginning of my career in insurance, and I worked for a State Farm agent here in Omaha, went out on my own and did it for a while. And then as fate happened, somebody called me and wanted me to look at one of the large national payroll companies. And I really, at first I didn't want to talk to him at all. And then I decided, I'm going to talk to him just to see what else is out there. And really my whole purpose in having that initial conversation was for me to figure out why I shouldn't go and why I was in a good place where I was. And, I took that initial interview and I ended up going, this sounds kind of fun. Like, I really think I might like this. So I stayed in that interview process and then ended up working for one of the large national payroll companies for about 10 years. I sold for a really brief time here in Omaha, about 7 months, and then was promoted to be the sales manager. And I did that for the majority of my time at that company. And had a blast, did really good, and learned so much about the business and about how to be successful at it. And then I left the industry for about 18 months and decided I had moved to Kansas City, and I decided I needed to go back into it. So my previous manager from the first company was at Paylocity, and he had been calling me for a couple months, and I kept giving him some of my old sales reps, their names and numbers. And I'm like, call them, talk to them. They'd be awesome on your team. And he's like, no, you're going to come work for us and you're going to open the Omaha market for us. And I was like, no, I just kept putting him off and giving him their numbers. And eventually I was flying to Minnesota. I was at First Data and I was flying to Minnesota, and it was brutal winter. It was like 40 below zero, and it was terrible. And he called me up and he's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm flying to Minnesota. And he's like, me too. We're going to go to dinner tonight. And so I was like, okay. So, opportunity intersected with timing. And Mark and I had a great discussion, and he convinced me that it was a good time for me to come to Paylocity. They had just went public, and I opened the Nebraska market for Paylocity. It was great. I did that for about 5 years. And then I thought I really wanted to go back into leadership. I loved helping people. I loved helping them realize their goals and figuring out what was necessary to make things happen, even crazy goals and crazy things, And so I went and it took me about 9 months to make the decision, but I went and took an opportunity for a regional vice president role at a smaller payroll company. And I did that for a bit. And I had a lot of success doing it. I hired 18 sales reps, 2 managers. COVID hit. and went through some reduction of force, and they asked me to start up a brand new division in channels. Obviously, relationships is one of my passions, so starting a channels program and channels division was right up my alley. So I did that, and we had a lot of success right away, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't feeling like I was successful, why I wasn't happy with my job. I wasn't happy with my success, even though we were putting up these amazing numbers, and typically that would have made me really happy. So I took some time in October-ish, went to Mexico for the first time in my entire life. I didn't take my computer. I thought I really need to just do some deep diving in my brain and my heart and figure out what's going on. Why am I not happy with this? And I came to the conclusion that maybe leadership wasn't really what I wanted to do right now. Maybe that I'm in a different place in my life and my priorities have changed. And I appreciate the things that I had at Paylacity and wanted to get back to selling again, so that I could see my end goal in my career, which is, to retire. So I felt like I learned while I was on that beach that I'm not chasing the career anymore. I'm chasing the piece of retiring. So I made the call to those two people, my favorite boss that hired me in the very beginning, and then my boss that I've had 3 times now at Paylacity. I made the call to both of them and made the transition back to Paylacity. So
yeah, and having get to know you, I have to admit, I'm sure when you picked up the phone and called, they had to be like, had to be like, you hear the story of the prodigal son coming home, right? But the prodigal daughter, and it's interesting. You talked about something there I think is important, and that is the purpose, right? So while you went to this new company, and sure, there was some excitement from the newness of it, the results were there, but having gotten to know you, I also know there was some chemistry lacking, right, from the teamwork and some deep personal feelings of alignment with the company. So one of the things that I admire about you is that you're very upfront about how you feel very aligned with Paylacity and how y'all go about business and how you conduct business. And I think that also played a factor into that. What was missing? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. A lot of people believe, especially in my industry, that there are companies that everybody can do payroll. Everybody has some version of an HRS system, but the people that are behind that are very, very important. So that's one of the reasons why I love Paylacity. We have cutting edge technology. We put our money back into it, and then the support and service. Like, I never have to apologize for what we put out there. The reputation is everything. I always joke around and say, like, when I sell somebody and they transition to Paylacity's product, I'm never coming up to them in a grocery store and hiding behind aisle 15 because I sold something we can't deliver on. We put our money where our mouth is. I don't have to worry about that. So
talk to me. Yeah, and that's important, right? Like, I guess, knowing that you can stand behind what you're selling as a salesperson, belief in the product is premium. It's without that, it's very hard to sell, right?
Absolutely.
When you talk about, Paylacity, and you talk about the cutting edge of how the programs work. First, talk about, what are some of the things that you feel really sets Paylacity apart from the competition? So this is where your genius comes out, because you really do know your product well. So for those people that may be watching that are, maybe they're on the ADP system, or they're on this other system that maybe they're disenfranchised with, or maybe they think that they just have to live with it because that's the way it is. Talk about some of the things that Paylocity does different? Because I know there's people out watching that really would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's huge is just in the sales process itself. So I'm going to go through a sales process with you and I'm going to ask you a million questions. And what I'm trying to accomplish in that is to figure out what might become a problem in implementation or down the road. I'm not just trying to slam my product down your throat. I want to be sure we're going to be a fit. And if we're not, I'm going to tell you, this is the reason why we're not going to be a fit. I'm going to help you find either a provider that can do it, or I'm going to give you, here's the steps that we have to do because that doesn't quite work right. And we're going to decide together which way makes sense. I'm never, again, it's reputation. Like, I've been doing this for 18 years. I'm not ever going to sacrifice my reputation for one sale. So we're figuring out together whether or not it's a good fit. And I think that's very different than most sales processes. Most of the time, they're just trying to get the sale and get the heck out of there. So that's one thing. The other thing I think is the company as a whole, Paylocity, is not arrogant at all about their product. So what we're always trying to do is, like, we have feedback buttons and we're asking our customers for feedback constantly. We aren't going out there and saying, we're going to develop X, Y, and Z because we're so smart. We're going out there and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what do you want us to develop? What would make your life easier? When it comes to applicant tracking and recruiting, what do you love? What do you hate? What should we do next? And we do our enhancements and our programming based on what we hear from our clients.
Wow. So, and you hear that from a company point of view, companies that create avenues for feedback and then act on feedback, those are the ones that really do move forward and have the test of time, right? One of the things I love that you said there is that in your mind, you may ask a million questions. To me, asking thoughtful questions through the process show care, right? Like, that shows that, look, I don't want to just give you a solution. I want to give you the right solution. Absolutely. And talk to me a little bit about, like, is that something that was you believe that was instilled in you through your mom and dad, through growing up, or is that something you developed over time? Because I think that that's a very special quality, that the genuine care, not just to, sure, we want to make a living, right? We got families to take care of, we got lifestyles, whatever, but there's a totally different person there that says, hey, look, I want to make sure that what I'm going to suggest is the right solution for you. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. So where do you think that came from?
I think it's a combination of things, right? So I think it definitely, my helping and wanting to find the right solution and integrity and stuff is definitely my family, my parents. It came from there. But, it's also a lot of training that I had to ask the right questions and do the right things. And for me, once I found out this was going to be my industry, it didn't make sense for me to do it any other way, right? I have to ask the questions and do things right because I have a reputation. If I ruin that, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, I'm never going to be able to sell to people that because you're gonna be like, oh, that person, she doesn't. Be careful, so I think you always have to do what's right. And if you're not a good fit for me and I point you in the right direction or I introduce you to somebody that can help you, maybe our paths cross in the future.
Absolutely.
Just do what's right by people. And I think, that's the underlying thing that I learned from my parents. And then the skill part of it or the tactical part of it of asking questions, I learned through a ton of training.
Yeah, I think that you learn good. I guess you would say integrity. You learn from growing up, right? Mm-hmm. The how you ask the question probably does. So, where did you get that great training? Was that Paylocity, or was that prior to that, or what company would you say has the best training program? Because you work for some pretty good companies out there.
Yeah, I would say when I first started out, I mean, Paychex was the first training that I got, and it was great training on how to execute a plan, how to put a plan together to hit your numbers, and how to execute it all the time. When I got to Paylocity is a higher level sale. So I had to, at that point, learn how to ask different questions and better questions and how to be more strategic in my sales process and things like that. And I got all of that training from Paylocity, and shout out to one of the best trainers I've ever met in my entire life, Brad Gardner. He was amazing at teaching us all of that.
Awesome. Well,
combination.
That's well, I mean, and I think that for anyone who's truly successful, I often get asked the same question I just asked you, and I said, I got to tell you, it's really mud. You know, it's reading books, it's some training I've been to, it's watching my father. I mean, it really is just a lot of things. And I'm just very humble and grateful for the opportunities that I've had to become the guy that I am, because I'm very happy and very comfortable with who I am as a person, and that I can add value to the world. And that's kind of what I'm doing even with this show. But so when you think about, looking at, one of the things I talked to you about, because I thought it would be kind of clever and interesting, is we talked a little bit one night about implementation, and that implementation, if done right, can be fairly smooth and it's always going to be a little bit disruptive. Just there's no way around it, but there's ways to go about it to where we can minimize that disruption, or it can become just utter chaos. So I thought you might want to talk about like how Paylocity manages the process to try to make it as smooth and easy for those bringing Paylocity on as possible.
Yeah. So again, I think it all starts in my in the discovery questioning. So it's getting down, asking a ton of questions, trying to figure out what might break. When we go through the process, what might happen? I think it all starts there, and it starts with also setting the right expectations with the client. This is how much time it's going to take, not brushing it off as this is the easiest thing in the world. It's going to be simple. We do things different, but really getting into the details of that. How much time is it going to take? What type of resources are they going to need? Just setting the right expectations about communication. If everybody's on the same page, it goes a lot more smoothly at that point. Plus, we try to bring in everybody into the process that we can. So we bring in implementation project managers so that they're along the entire way, so that they can ask questions and they can be on the same page, and they can see what, again, might go wrong. So we have a plan for that.
That's amazing. So when you're dealing with these, obviously, you're at the enterprise level, right? So like you're the enterprise executive. So I know at one point you really helped Paylocity when you were there the first time, building up Omaha from us. You kind of did all encompassing, but you did focus a lot on smaller regional companies, right? And now you've moved on to where you're looking at larger companies. So how has that transition been for you? And talk a little bit about the difference between smaller and larger enterprises as it relates to your space.
Yeah. So for our space, smaller moves faster, right? So it's easier to make decisions. They don't have as many people involved. So that part's been a transition for me, is just not feeling the win all the time. Like, I used to average selling 90 new clients a year. That's a lot of yeses that you're hearing all the time. Now my expectation is, 6 in a year. So the thing that's been easier for me is the larger clients are all about relationships, right? So I'm trying to go deep and wide inside an organization and build relationships at all levels. So at this, at the C level, at the HR director level, payroll, I need all of them to know who we are and have a relationship with us. So for me, that part's been easier because I love building relationships. So
yeah. I was going to say I would gather it gets a little bit more dicey, because when you talk about payroll, it's not just HR you got to convince. I mean, you're talking about the CEO, COO, CFO, and probably maybe even some companies where maybe one level down from them. And so
HR directors and payroll managers and
and so then it becomes, getting a heck yes from 6 is much harder than 2, right? So so I'm curious with you, like, has there been an adjustment from you of, I would I could put myself in your shoes and say, like, if I was to go meet with the CEO of Hy-Vee, right? Like, that would be a different meeting in my mind than maybe the CEO of a smaller company. I don't want to call any name out, but let's just say of 150 people here in Omaha, you're doing $1 to $5 million company, right? Definitely a very successful business, but smaller, right? Like, that CEO meeting someone here locally, CEO there, and that's got to be totally different. So was there a period there where you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna meet this guy, and like, I gotta believe there's like this freak out moments, right?
I still do sometimes. But I always lean on, at least locally, finding a connection. Like, Jason, do you know so and so? Because it softens it for me. It doesn't make it as big and scary. But I'm always looking to make it a little bit more warm and friendly, and not just this big bad CEO in the room, but it's definitely a more strategic conversation when you're at the CEO level about company goals and what they're trying to accomplish. And then how do we help them accomplish those goals through the payroll or the HCM product? When you're in a smaller company, it's very tactical. The conversation is a lot more feature functionality and how do we do things different than other companies? So it's a very different conversation.
Yeah. And I was going to say, the other thing that I think is interesting is, you live here in Omaha and Paylocity is here. And, for a lot of people living around the country that maybe you're tuning in or will tune in later, Omaha is kind of like this hidden gem. So there's a lot of businesses that are based out of here or have regional offices out of here. I mean, Omaha is a pretty happening place for business, and it's when I tell people about this, they look at me like I have two horns, like, really, Omaha? And I'm like, yeah, like I would have never guessed it. Like, ConAgra was based here forever. They've recently kind of fragmented their operation a little bit, but we definitely have some huge businesses that are located here, and which creates its own melting pot, if you will, for business. So
absolutely.
So when if you were to speak to somebody out maybe watching, how do you know, as an HR director, chief of HR officer or whatever, what are some signals that maybe it's time to look at your system that you use for processing payroll, and perhaps that it may be time to contact someone like yourself for a look under the hood of, does it make sense to change?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you haven't done it in a while, you should definitely be doing it, because technology changes so quickly. There are older legacy companies that can't keep up on a technology front because they've got older systems. So if you haven't looked in a while, you should, period. It's probably not the best business decision to not look. Outside of that, like service, if you're not being able to get somebody on a phone to call or to talk to them, or if you have longer wait times, or if you're using a ticketing system for your help, all of those things should be, indicators that you should look at someone else. If you're using multiple systems for things that touch HR, you should be looking at someone else. If you're not allowed to do integrations on your system, you should look for someone else. There's just a lot of moving parts to it, that payroll and HR are so deadline driven that the people that make decisions inside of it aren't sitting there every day saying, what could I have to make my life easier? How do I get people paid? How do I deal with compliance? How do I get W-2s out? They're dealing with everything so date driven. They don't think about a wish list. What could I have? When we sit down and talk to them and we start asking the questions, they're like, people can do that? I didn't know that was possible. So then they start to see how efficient they could be, and how different their lives could be at work, because all they have to do is put in a different system.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that goes with a lot of things, right? Where we get so ingrained in what we're doing day to day to day to day. And I saw a great post on LinkedIn actually yesterday, that had it was a picture of a turkey in the oven, and it goes on to say that when the chicken got so done, they cut off one of the legs, and she went and asked the mom, "Well, mom, why do we do that?" Well, that's because that's how your grandma always did it. So she went back to grandma and said, "Grandma, why do we do that?" Well, that's because my mom always did.
Right.
And she was lucky enough that her great grandmother was alive. So she went and said, "Great grandma, why did you cut the leg off?" And she goes, "Oh, sweetheart, the ovens used to be smaller. We had to cut it off so it fit in the oven." And I just thought it was a great example of
Right.
there's a lot to learn there, right? Like
Yeah.
from a lifestyle point of view, that are we doing things because there's a real business or a real reason we do them, or do we do them that way because that's what we've always done and that's just what we've accepted as our destiny or our fate, right?
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying there is, look, if you have frustrations, or you have your system is not, if the system doesn't make the job easier and the system creates more frustration, it might be time to call Julie and see what the
Yeah.
folks at Paylocity have going on, because
Yeah.
I can tell you that the system they have is very robust, and it's got, y'all have got a lot of new technology. Is there any new features or any cool new features y'all have recently added that you could tell us about?
I don't know if there's anything that's super recent that we've added. We do a lot on video now, so you can have like video in your applicant tracking and recruiting, and there's just there's a lot of video capabilities now inside the system. Lots of survey capabilities, so it's
When you
oh, go
when
ahead.
you I didn't mean to interrupt you. When you say survey, is that kind of like Survey Monkey, like where you can be like, do
Yep.
I feel like where you could send out and do pulses with your team, where you're like, do I feel that I'm fairly compensated comparable to other companies in our field?
Yeah, you could do that. You could do a survey for, let's say, we're all gonna get to go on company picnics this year, and we're gonna say, do you want vegetarian? Do you want chicken? Do you want beef? You could have that be in there as a survey. You could do, pretty much anything you want to put out to either a single individual, a group of people, or the entire company population.
Wow. And is that all done through your app and everyone has the app downloaded, or how does
It's
that
desktop.
interface?
Yeah, it's on the desktop. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what else would, if you were to say, Jason, this is what this is why Paylocity is the bomb. So you've given us a lot, but is there anything else that you would say that, like, why you believe that Paylocity is the primo emo of the industry?
Yeah, I think when you look at technology, it's like a Ferrari in technology, but it has this awesome service model behind it. So you're not compromising one or the other. You get both great technology and super awesome service, which is pretty much unheard of. You have to decide you're going to take one or the other.
That's right. So, I also wanted to talk to you. So, in addition to being this, expert in your field of HR and payroll, one of the biggest gifts I think you have, in it works out perfectly for the business you're in, is your ability to network. You have this like God-given sixth sense of knowing, like, hey, you know what? Bob and Jason need to meet because those guys are so alike, and I could see them working together. Like, so I was curious as to, how long have you really been in the, into this mindset of networking and connecting people, and when did it start?
I would say I've probably always done it somewhat, but once I started at Paylocity was when I really started doing a lot of networking. And it all started from the fact that, I'd been managing for so long and I knew the metrics that it took to be successful, but I also knew that I was coming off a big, giant compensation package into a base salary to sell, a small base salary to sell again with no pipeline, starting a brand new market. So I was like, I need to see as many people as I can get in front of, and I don't care who they are. And so I started just doing that and seeing people and figuring out, like, can they help me? Can I help them? Like, how do we intertwine our worlds so that I can get referrals or future referrals from them? And it started there, and it just kept growing. And yeah, I don't know. I it's kind of my happy place. And in my personal life, you know this, my personal life and my work life they're the same. Like,
yeah, Julie is Julie. So the Julie you see here is the Julie you'll see at a networking event or whatever. I mean, she really is like just one of the most awesome people I've met in a long time. And I truly mean that. So I want to go back. So you talk about, okay, holy cow, I just took this job with Paylocity, have no pipeline. I got to build this thing. Like it's like walking out and saying, okay, I got to build a house and I have no foundation. There's dirt. So I got to get concrete. I got to get a house. I got to do all this stuff. Right. So
yeah,
like, what were some of the, because there's somebody, I guarantee you, there's somebody that's going to watch this or watching right now that doesn't know where to start. They're like, man, I would love to get to know people and to really build a network, whether it be on a platform like LinkedIn or whether it be in person, right? So what were some of those early things you did to really start meeting people? Was that like coffee? Was that, how did you do it?
Yeah. So the first thought process was, when I left First Data, which was, I had 9 states. I was on a plane every single week. So I wasn't plugged in anymore in the Omaha community. So I knew I had to do something fast. I had to get plugged in fast. So it was, holy cow, girl, you better put your money where your mouth is. You told these people that you managed for all these years that if they did X, Y, and Z, they'd become successful and they'd make this much money. And I knew making that much money wasn't enough. So I knew I had to double the numbers. So first thing I did was I sat down with LinkedIn and I started filtering and finding contacts. And I looked up my own personal contacts. And if I knew those people, I was setting an appointment right there off LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, I've switched jobs. I'd love to sit down and talk to you just for a few minutes about what I'm doing today. And I remember a great friend of mine who you've met, Darren Oberreich, was one of the first people that I sat down with. And I'm like, Darren, I've got to talk to you about this. And I sat down with him, and 2 things that came out of that meeting. First, the front page of my legal pad was full of people that he wanted me to call next. My question was, who do I call next? Who can help me? And he helped me fill the whole page. So I had another day's worth of calling. The second thing came out of it. After I left, he called me up and he said, guess what I just did? I'm like, well, he's like, I bought a whole bunch of Paylocity stock. And I'm like, you did? And he's like, yeah, anybody that can make payroll sexy, I'm buying that stock. And that has definitely paid off. So, yeah, so I did that with everybody. I just sat down, no matter if they were a sales rep, if they were a receptionist, no matter what. It was just, let me tell you about what I'm doing. And then who do you think I should call next? Like, I need to build this. I need help. Who should I call? And everybody is willing to help you if you ask.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part, is that people they're not willing to ask. Everybody's, I shouldn't say everyone, but just about anybody that you'd want to get to know has got 30 minutes, right?
Absolutely.
And if they don't, then they probably aren't the kind of people that you want to be connected with anyway.
Well, and I always remember, like, that's how I started. That's how I had an awesome rookie year. That's how I got started. So anytime anybody asks me for that, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to help them with whatever I can help them with. Who can I connect you with? Let me learn more so I can get into my Rolodex in my brain and decide who I can introduce you to that's going to help you get ahead faster.
Yeah, and I think that what happens then is then it snowballs, right? So then
Absolutely.
You get to meeting these 5 or 6 people, and then I call it, Omaha's a weird place, right? So it's this really spanned out. There's 1 million people that live in the area or in the metro, but yet it's really spread out. Mm-hmm. And you can be like, man, I think I about know just about everybody in Omaha. Then you'll meet a new group, and you're like, holy cow, I don't know any of these people.
Right.
So, it's been very, even with when I started to network with you on Wednesday evenings, I have met so many people through that, and then offshoots of that, and it's all just because of willingness to put myself out there, right? And so if you're out there and you're wanting to network, do what Julie did. You gotta be willing to ask, and you gotta be willing to be vulnerable, and just to say, hey, I need help. And I think that's a huge lesson. So when you think about that and you think about the networking, I mean, obviously the business aspect of it has been wonderful, but talk about some of the personal satisfaction, because I know you and I know that the joy it gives you, and talk about that.
I just love helping people. I know I've had fabulous mentors throughout my career. I've met my closest friends are all people that I met through business and networking for the most part. So, it's hugely beneficial. But it's nice. You meet a ton of great people, and you just help people be successful. I love it. It's fantastic. Watch people succeed.
Yeah, and so we've got a few minutes left here, and I'll get to that. But just for the audience sake, if you got any questions or anything about Paylocity, about Julie or her career or networking, would love to ask her, because I'm telling you, you're never going to get a better opportunity to ask somebody a question in this arena, because she's genius level on both. So. So, one other thing I was going to say was, when you start talking about connecting people, and you're really good at this. So, like, how did you? I know the answer, I think, because it's almost intuitive. But is there anything that really has helped you to learn those connection, like Bob and Jason, or Tom and Jerry? Those guys got to be right. Like, when did that start? Has that always been there, or is that something that's really developed over time?
I think when you decide to sit down and listen to people, and really listen to what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish, what their goals are, and just get to know them as a human, I think it naturally comes to you with, oh, that person is like this person, or this person could help them, or this person knows the right people to help them. I think that's where it all starts, is just really actually caring about the human sitting in front of you and wanting to genuinely know them better.
Well, and I think that's, and I think that makes total sense. It's really interesting, because I think there are connectors. I really, they talk about givers and takers. I think there's giver, takers, and connectors, right? Because I don't know. For me, I even find myself naturally to where someone tells me they have a problem or they're facing a challenge, like I immediately go into my mind of, okay, how can I help this person? Yeah. Do I just give them advice? Do I give them a pat on the back and say, hey, hang in there? Maybe I'm crazy, but that's how I operate. Like, it's immediate, right? So then,
absolutely.
And then usually what happens is then the next thing that goes in my mind is, if I'm the guy that can help them fix it, then we're just gonna get it fixed right now. Mm-hmm. More times than not, I'm not the guy that can fix the problem. Yeah. And so I start thinking, okay, what tools do I have that I can help them fix this problem, right? So do you go through that same kind of a thing? So
absolutely. It's definitely, you're sitting there having a conversation, they're explaining whatever their challenge that they're having, and I want to fix it, whether I can fix it or I can put them in touch with somebody else that can. That's definitely number one priority once we start hearing about it.
So I did come up with one question that I forgot to ask when we're kind of on the Paylocity side, because I think this would be really cool. Is, obviously networking during COVID-19 is a whole different animal than when prior to COVID, right? Where you can
absolutely
just go see somebody at a drop of a hat. So how was that, and how did that affect, the last year for you guys at Paylocity? And really, conducted meetings and creating those meaningful relationships through channels like this, right? Virtually.
Yeah, I would say that's been a big challenge for me because I am such a connector. And I find it hard. Like if you don't turn on your video and I can't look you eyeball to eyeball, I have a really hard time with it. So that's been a big, big transition. I think we're lucky that we're in Omaha and things have opened up more quickly than a lot of places. I found that even, last summer, people were starting to meet a little bit as soon as the restaurants would open up a little bit. Not necessarily in offices, but for networking, people were meeting. So that's helped. But really getting used to Zoom and getting used to connecting with people. And a lot of it is in your head. Like sometimes it's really not that different. As long as I can see you, we can have the conversation and we can connect. I just have a bigger problem when I can't see you. So
yeah, and I don't know, I will tell you, I've been on a few Zooms that way, and I'm like, dude, we should have just picked up the phone if you're not going to turn your camera on. That's the way I look at it. But
absolutely,
perhaps I'm weird like that. But I am much better in person. I just feel like I sense people in a really weird way, right? Like, and sometimes through virtual, I don't get that. I don't get the sense that I do in person. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's body language, but when I'm in person, man, I can read people really quick. It's almost, if you were to talk to the people that report directly to me, they call it ESP and they call it a sixth sense. They're like, how do you know this? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do. And I've learned to trust it. It took me a long time to trust it because I thought I was just being judgmental. But what I've really come to realize is that there really is something there.
Yeah.
So as we kind of try to get, as we head towards the finish here, first of all, I really appreciate your time. It's been awesome. I always ask our guests to, leave a lasting word of impact of, for somebody out there looking to make a change or to improve their living a purposeful life. You definitely live a purposeful life, whether it's with work and being intentional with the people that you interact with, that you network with, or how you lead your life, taking time for leisure. I know you just got back from a vacation. You're very purposeful in everything that you do. So what's some advice that you can give those watching about living a more purposeful lifestyle?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice, and it sounds so cliche and it's things you read in books and everything, but it's, to be able to live life with no regret. I left Paylocity and I could look back and say that I regretted leaving, but really I didn't, right? I had to go through that process in order to find what my real journey was for the next 5 to 10 years. And it had to lead me back to Paylocity and have me appreciate the things that I was possibly taking for granted in the past. So I think just do it, make the decision that you're not going to have any regrets, because I think that's hard for people. Like you said, I just got back from Costa Rica, and people say, oh, it'd be nice to do that. I'm like, you just have to make the decision that I'm going to do this and then plan to do it that way. Don't live your life. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So
amen. So I couldn't have said it better myself. Life is short and regret sucks. So don't put yourself in that position. So Julie, thank you for being here today. For all you watching, we really, really appreciate your support and watching the show. And until next Wednesday, same time, same place, we're signing out, and I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, Julie.
Bye.